Hi, this is John Goodman. Now, I hope I don't shock anybody, but I am actually going to use PowerPoint slides. Whoa, John Goodman's using PowerPoint slides for this webcast. What is this webcast about? Well, it's quite common for real estate brokers to write formulas in deals. For example, there's a survey, it's expensive. So maybe there's a formula that says that the parties will split the cost of the survey 50-50. That's a formula. We write more complicated formulas, like maybe the seller will pay the first $5,000, and if the cost exceeds $5,000, then the parties will split the excess. Maybe it's even more complicated. The seller will pay the first $5,000. If it exceeds $5,000, the stakeholders will split the excess pro rata up to some cap. Okay. So brokers write formulas a lot. And I don't want to scare you. I don't want to suggest, oh, I got to delete this thing here. Little boo-boo. It'll be better on the next one. I don't want to suggest that these formulas create mischief in, even 10% of transactions. But when they do create mischief, it's painful. And so let me pull up the PowerPoint slides. And my goal is to help you be better at drafting formulas. Okay, here we go. Here we go. I got to click in here. Here we go. All right, so first of all, we're talking about miscommunication about math, which let's recognize that that's part of a bigger issue, miscommunication in general. And we all know how easy it is to miscommunicate in general. Think about the miscommunications that you have with the people that you live with, which if you don't love those people, you probably, at least are supposed to like those people. Think about all that miscommunication you have. And I'll just, for myself, my wife is a lawyer. I'm a lawyer. We have passed many standardized tests that suggest we have a pretty good command of the English language. Do we have less misunderstanding than any other two people who live together? I doubt it. We misunderstand each other all the time. So miscommunication is hard. Miscommunication is hard. All that miscommunication we have about communication in general can come to math. It's important to recognize that. But math brings its own particular opportunities to stub our toes. Let's also recognize a phenomenon that when you are interacting, when you're in your role as a broker, it's not just a two-person communication. You, the broker, this is you, the broker, are communicating with your client, and there is potential for miscommunication along this communication channel. However, let's also recognize that there's also an opportunity for miscommunication as you interact with these third persons. All right, let's talk about math. So some parts of math don't tend to lead to miscommunication. Math behaves with addition. A plus B plus C equals C plus B plus A. And if you don't like thinking about A plus B plus C, well, let's just use real numbers. 1 plus 2 plus 3 equals 3 plus 2 plus 1. Order does not matter with addition. 6 equals 6. Order does not matter with multiplication. 2 times 3 times 4 calculates to 24, which is exactly the same if you reverse the order. 4 times 3 times 2 is 24. So far, so good. Grouping does not matter with addition. Notice that A, B, and C are all in the same order here. A, B, and C is in the same order here. And 3 plus the sum of 4 plus 5 equals 3 plus 4 plus 5. These parentheses suggest an order. they don't suggest an order, they compel an order. So 3 plus 9 is the same as 7 plus 5. 12 equals 12. Same thing with multiplication. Same thing with multiplication. Grouping does not matter with multiplication. 2 times 3 times 4, 2 times 12 equals 2 times 3 times 4. 24 equals 24. So if we're only talking about formulas that involve addition or multiplication, and at least if the numbers we're talking about are all positive numbers, and they're also numbers that are 1 or higher, order does not matter with multiplication or addition. And if you didn't follow what I just said, I'll give you some examples in a minute. But now let's start to look at some mischievous behavior. So don't get distracted by these numbers just yet. Focus on me for a second. This is the transaction that motivated this presentation. So in this transaction, the transaction went under contract for $3 million. And in the course of the transaction, before the transaction closed, there was an inspection item. And the inspection item revealed a real problem, and it was a problem that the seller was not aware of. It was not already reflected in the price of the property. And so the parties entered into a resolution that was going to cost the seller $50,000. And in this transaction, the seller's rationale was, well, if I'm being nicked for $50,000, I'm not really selling the property for $3 million. And so I want to pay the buyer's side commission. I want to pay the buyer's side broker an adjusted amount, adjusting for this $50,000. Now, one thing to notice about this is that part of what caused the seller to focus on this issue is because the seller, not the listing broker, the seller was paying the buyer side commission. Hey, if I'm being nicked for $50,000, I want some adjustment. So in the inspection resolution, there was a formula that was written to address how the buyer side broker's commission would be adjusted. Now let's look at the PowerPoint slide. Now what's logical and what the buyer side broker understood in the transaction is that the formula would look like this bottom one here. 3 million minus 50. Okay, the seller isn't really, in the seller's mind at least, selling for 3 million. They're selling for $2,950,000. So let's subtract $50,000 from the 3 million and then multiply that by the buyer side compensation rate, 3%. So the buyer side broker was expecting a commission of this figure times 3%. The buyer side broker was expecting to be paid at closing a buyer side compensation of this $88,500. This is what the seller was expecting. The seller was expecting that the 3 million would be multiplied by the 3%, and then from that number, there would be a $50,000 adjustment. Now, most of you who are watching this are brokers, and you think that's ridiculous, but nevertheless, that's what the seller was expecting. So let's notice that if we do the math here, 3 million times 3% is 90,000 minus the 50,000. The seller was expecting to pay the buyer side broker $40,000. How did this issue come to a head? It came to a head the morning of the closing. The title company prepared the settlement statements. The settlement statements came out. The settlement statements were prepared showing that the buyer side broker would receive this 88.5. The seller said, no, I'm expecting to pay the 40, and the feces hits the fan at that stage. Well, what did the language say? I'm not going to show you the language, And the reason I'm not going to show you the language is there's no point in me showing you bad language. But the language was neither decisively this formula, nor was it decisively that formula. Both brokers had egg on their face. And so we had a legitimate skirmish. And you know how these skirmishes tend to get resolved. They ended up splitting the difference. So the buyer side broker, instead of getting paid $88,500, ended up getting about $20,000 less than $88,500, $68,500. The buyer side broker took a haircut of $20,000 due to a bad formula. Why did that happen? Well, with subtraction, order matters. 5 minus 3 is 2, very different than 3 minus 5, which is a minus 2. Order matters with division. 10 divided by 2 equals 5. 2 divided by 10 is less than 1. It's 2/10. Grouping, how you group things, the sequence, the order in which you do the calculations makes a difference with subtraction. 10, notice these three numbers are the exact same numbers. 10, 5, 2. They're in the exact same order in the formula, but the way they're grouped, the way they're sequenced makes a difference. 10 minus 5 minus 2 equals 3. 10 minus 5 minus 2 equals 7. Grouping matters with subtraction. It matters with division. Notice in these two calculations, the numbers are the same, 100, 10, and 2. They're in the exact same order. They're written out in the same order, but the way they're grouped, if you do this calculation first, 100 divided by 10 is 10, divided by 2 equals 5. If you do this calculation first, 10 divided by 2 is 5. 100 divided by 5 is 20. 5 does not equal 20. Grouping matters with division. Okay, what are you supposed to do? Well, I've exhausted your attention span right now. I'm teasing you. We'll address what you do in the next video. For the time being, let me say thanks for watching. I have to turn off the recording. I've stopped the screen share. See if I can remember how to do this. And I'm about to stop the recording, but remember my line. We live in a very complicated world. Be careful out there. Catch you in the next video.